But for a church, it's a chance for you and I as a body to evaluate where we are, what we're doing, and ultimately, are we still on mission or not? Are we where we're supposed to be and headed in the direction that God would have for us to head in as a body? And that calls for us again to look at and understand what's church. What does the Bible say that church is really supposed to be about? I mean, if you want to get technical about it, whenever you ask the question and try to understand what is church, we understand this. First of all, church is not a place that you go. Church is who we are. Amen. Brother DJ, to say that this morning basically is to say this. The reason that 6220 U.S. Highway 220 South is called the Lighthouse Baptist Church is because that's where this body meets. We meet on this property, and that's what makes this a church. As a matter of fact, I'll say this, that if we quit meeting here, Brother DJ, there wouldn't be a church here. Unless another body took this facility and a church started meeting here again. The church is not, and in America, and I'm afraid it's got to be too much of the idea that church is something I do an hour one time a week. No, church isn't where we go. Church is who we are. You're not a church by yourself, but when we assemble together, we collectively make up the church. And with that in mind this morning, we have to realize that there are scriptural purposes very clearly laid out in the Bible of what church is supposed to be like and what a church constitutes of and what makes up a church. What's our activities? What are we supposed to be about? I'll give you just a quick synopsis of that this morning. First of all, understand this. When it comes to the scriptural purposes of a church, members of a church assemble for the purposes of worshiping the Lord, fellowshipping with each other, and praying together. That's found in the Bible, in the book of Acts, chapter number 2. We have already spent time in worship. We worship God as we sung. We worship God as we gave. And we are worshiping God now as we preach the Word and look to hear from what God has to say to us to start this brand new year. So we meet for those purposes. Not only does a church meet for worship and for prayer and also for fellowship, but we also meet as a body, listen to me now, to exercise our spiritual gifts. God uniquely gifts every one of His children, and as we plug that in unanimously to this one body, we get the work of God done in the community that He's placed us in. The Bible teaches us in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 through 10, and later in chapter number 12, verse 28, that God Himself orchestrates and puts inside of a body, a church family, everything that they need to be able to represent and give the work of God a fair shake in the day in which we live. A local assembly meets to practice the ordinances of the church. Believers' baptism when people get saved, to celebrate and or take communion together. That is another action that the church does. And then lastly, the church as a body, it meets to do the good works of God in our community as well as execute the Great Commission. That's what church really is about.